I believe there have been 3 crossroads I have passed where even I was anticipating there is going to be a physical confrontation here because they know what I stand for. And to the human mind, it makes absolutely no sense how I sailed past without confrontation.
Your Majesty Omobashola Emiko, thank you for your time with us today.
Thank you.
Let me start by asking you, did you always, ever want to be a king?
He was destined to be a king, and I was destined to be a prophet. It definitely felt like a throwback to King David and Prophet Samuel. December 29, 2018. I remember feeling terrified. Someone had loaned us their private jet and hired a military escort and bulletproof envoys to take us at top speed to a meeting in Delta. And the scariest part, I had no idea why I was going. God just said, leave Windsor and go to Warri. He just said, go.
Well, it was in early 2018 that the Lord came to me in a very kind of non-spiritual way. I was actually in the shower, and he said to me, Tomi, are you ready for the Macedonian Call? And immediately I said, yes, Lord. I lifted up my hands and there was shower water in my face. I said, yes, I'm ready for the Macedonian Call. And then I came out the shower and I said, what's the Macedonian Call? And I remember going to my wife and telling her that I believe God is opening up Africa and Asia as 2 nations. I went to Nigeria and preached a couple of conferences, and my uncle asked me if I had a word for Nigeria. And I said, well, I've never had a word for Africa, but if you pray, I believe God will show me something. So that night, actually, I had a dream that became a prophetic word for Nigeria that was viewed hundreds of thousands of times around the nation. I came back from Nigeria in 2018, greeted my wife and my kids, and then I got a call from the host, Pastor Evie, and she said, I had a dream about you. I said, well, what was the dream? She said, you FaceTimed me and you said, I need to go to Warri. And I said it so adamantly in the dream that she called the former governor of Lagos's daughter. And she said, Apostle Tomi needs to go to Warri. And she said, I've been praying for him to come here for many years. So she shared this dream with me, and immediately I grabbed a map that I bought on my trip on my way back home, and I looked at the map and I realized Warri was in the Delta, and I'd watched Vice News, I've watched CNN and all of the kidnapping stories, the oil vigilante stories, the spill stories, and I said, okay, let me pray and ask God and I'll get back to you. The interesting thing, Delphine, is as soon as one knee touched the ground, the Lord said, you're going. I spoke to my wife said, well, if God said it, go. I called Evie and I said, I'll go on one condition. I said, you have to fly me in and you have to fly me out on the same day. Bearing in mind, I still didn't know why I needed to go to Warri, but everything in God is a journey of faith, and I've learned over the years with the prophetic to just trust Him on the journey. When I came to Lagos, everybody was startled to see me, but they were more excited because the prophetic word had already gone ahead of me. And I did a couple of news interviews and a couple of different things about the prophetic word. And then it was time to go to Delta, and I made sure that was the last trip so I could psych myself up for whatever my plane journey would have. But then only to be told the planes in and out of Warri had shut down and there was no way in and out. And a businessman had called, I won't mention his name, but he called one of our leaders in Rig Africa and said, I heard you have Prophet with you and he needs to go somewhere. I said, that's okay, take my private jet. So this is my first time on a private jet, my first time in Warri. We landed in Benin. The former governor's daughter had hired an escort to take us to the meeting. And we're in a very, very kind of middle-ish sized room. Not many people were there because it was our first time doing a conference in the Delta. We called it the Delta Prophetic Conference. Halfway through the service, a man walked into the meeting and the Lord told me, this man was why I sent you here.
The Macedonian Call?
This was the Macedonian Call, absolutely. And it was there that I met Olu, who was then Prince Shola, or Shola as, well, stranger as I knew him. I called him up. He looked like he didn't want to come up, to be honest, but he brought his recorder with him and he recorded. I just grabbed his hand and I immediately saw a vision.
I feel like when I'm touching you, I'm touching an important man. I feel like God sent me here for you. I see you standing and crying to God. I see you standing and crying to God. And I see you saying, God, where is the inheritance of my father? Yes, the Lord says, son, do you want to be the pastor of a sheep, or do you want to be the shepherd of a nation? The Lord says, son, if you decide, I will give you back what they want from you.
So Ogiami, in that moment when you received this word, what was going on in your heart?
In the moment I received it, if I recall correctly, the best way to describe it was when Joseph was wrestling with the angel and he grabs him in the end and it's like, until you bless me. So when he started speaking, I felt, I'm going to hold on to this, which was why I grabbed him. And interestingly, it was not the first time I had gotten word to that effect. But the people who had given that word prior, they knew me and they knew of my circumstance. I was a complete stranger to him. And a part of it was also embarrassing in the sense that my uncle was reigning and he did not give me this word in my house in Lagos or in Abuja. He gave it to me in Warri. And I was thinking, I'm like, wow, there are people in the audience who know the story. And I now thought, has he put a target on my back? So those were the initial thoughts, but I said, well, if he has put a target on my back, God will protect me. And I walked out of there. I don't think I've ever told him, and I think I only recently told my wife a few days ago. When I got in the car, and as I was heading home, I looked up in the sky and I saw the cloud in the form and shape of this crown. I kid you not. And I just shook my head and thought, well, there's a sign. And here we are today.
About stewarding the prophetic, I would like to direct that question at Olori. Throughout the Idanican process, even before that, 3 years leading up, what has it been like holding on to that word and warring with it?
I believe as people who are prophetic and understand prophetic process, and just believers in general, we know that once a prophetic word is given, it is now our responsibility to wage a good warfare with it by way of praying and declaring that which we have heard already. And so in the years leading up to it, but even more so in the months that have led up to this process, we have ensured that intercession has really gone forth to birth that which was already spoken, even in the spirit before.
There was something I said at the beginning of this process before I was officially announced back in April, when I was asked the question by a few people. And I believe they were almost preparing my mind, because they were like, you are going to face this before you get crowned, especially because the oracle has chosen you. How are you now going to say, well, the oracle has chosen me, but I'm not going to do this?
One of the biggest challenges to navigate was the fact that Ogiami III was a Christian, a challenge that his father, Ogiami II, also faced. According to the Guardian newspaper, in his coronation speech, his father, Ogiami II, renounced the gods of the land and even the title Ogiami because it was not Christian. It was a decision that he deeply suffered from. As a result, his own people even tried to revolt against him. As a student of Riggs School of Apostles and Prophets in Lagos, I taught on the Christian's place in an unchristian world. There was a place in the curriculum called Prophets to Pharaohs. In it, I taught on how Joseph was able to embrace a new name, Zaphanath-Paneah, even though it was a pagan name, because transformation of nations meant that we had to be meek as doves and yet crafty as serpents. It was a part in the curriculum that then Prince Shola Emeka was drawn to and asked if he could do this for his thesis. I thought it was most fitting, as it would help him navigate the difficult terrain of the Shekiri religion, which has Aritse as its supreme deity and creator of the world. I would teach Prince Shola and the class of 2020 that you are like Daniel. Let them name you their traditional names, attend their traditional schools of astrology and sorcery, but refuse to eat at the king's table. I'd like to think that this went a long way in the process of his rites of passage to become Ogiami.
So let's journey forward. I have seen a lot of reactions on social media regarding the coronation and the journey so far. And one of the major points of discussion is this family being a believing family and how a balance can be made with rites and rituals of tradition. So the question is directed at you, Ogiami. How do you draw the line? How do you balance being a Christian, a follower of Christ, with the rites and traditions that come with the throne?
What I'll say is, the 28 years my dad reigned, of those 28 years, if you want to call it maybe 15, 20 years where I was really aware of what was going on, really paying attention. I think it was important for me to see that imagery, that it was and it is possible. It was very important for me to see. But now, it's one thing riding shotgun in a car and thinking you know how to drive. You know, I've been asked similar questions like this, and the truth of the matter is, as much as I stayed close and observed, it's completely different when you are sat here. So, the only experience or interaction I have with this so far is all that has happened in the last 7 to 8 months. And I'm not sure how much detail I can go into. But because I had proposed that I was going to take a stand for Christ in my heart and also verbally, I believe there have been 3 crossroads I have passed, where even I was anticipating there is going to be a physical confrontation here because they know what I stand for.
This is, in every ramification, a very special day. one that has been predestined and divinely ordained by the Most High God. He and He alone could have determined that 3 months after our Idanike began in May, our coronation will take place today, the only Saturday in this year 2021 that occurs as the 21st day of the month. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this unique August day is truly a day of the Almighty God's divine visitation to Warri Kingdom. It is not just a divine visitation, it heralds a divine habitation.
To the human mind, it makes absolutely no sense how I sailed past without confrontation. And once again, without going into much detail, the actors who you would have expected to have led the charge in saying, oh no, this is going to have to happen, were the ones who seemed to have just opened the door and like, just go ahead and go. And once again, I think, or I believe, it's because I am in Christ. So even when, because of fulfilling the traditions of men, and I am in Christ, it would appear as though I have fulfilled it, but Christ has actually done what needs to be done. In that when they see me come, it's like, oh no, he checks out, he looks good, let him go. And there was something I said at the beginning of this process before I was officially announced back in April, when I was asked the question by a few people. And I believe they were almost preparing my mind because they were like, you are going to face this before you get crowned. How are you going to, especially because the oracle has chosen you, how are you now going to say, well, the oracle has chosen me, but I'm not going to do this? Because I guess they were trying to imply there could be problems there. And what I said to them was, I simply drew an analogy. I said, this is the way I see the spiritual world. The spiritual world is, and Prophet, correct me if I'm wrong, is a neutral place. Everybody participates in the spiritual world. Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindu, traditional worship, everybody participates there. But the way I see the spiritual world is when, and I'm thinking of it like a video game, and I pick Jesus as my player to go into the spiritual world, nobody defeats him. No one can even battle him. So, the way his word says, all principalities, powers, thrones, dominion, everything is under him. I explained to them that in the same way, a parallel, with the exception of the Creator God, every deity in this kingdom is subject under the feet of the Olu. And they all acknowledged that is true. So mirroring what Christ has said and what Christ is, it mirrors here. And I said to them, as Christ interacts with these deities, thrones and dominions and all that, that's the same way I will interact with all these deities who are here, who the people acknowledge are there. And as he instructs me to interact with them, that is how I will interact with them. And here we are today.
Okay, let me just piggyback off that question. Speaking of interaction, I listened to your speech at the coronation again, and it sounded like a confrontation. When you renounced the curses on the land, when you pronounced blessings on the land, it sounded like a fight. Can you walk us through what was happening on the inside of you as you were speaking? Your voice was louder than it normally would. It was assertive. There was a change in the atmosphere. People knew that a king was speaking.
I hereby reverse the curse placed over this land. In its place, I release forgiveness and healing to the federal government of Nigeria whose might was used to propagate that offense. And I decree unprecedented and uncommon peace, prosperity, progress, development upon this land. I bring down the government of heaven onto this land, and I direct it to flow as a force that can neither be sabotaged, slowed, nor stopped. It goes out as a strong ripple effect emanating from this kingdom to the rest of the Niger Delta, to the rest of the Nigerian nation, and even the African continent.
So what were you thinking about when you gave the speech?
Well, I'm surprised to hear it sounded like a confrontation. I suppose it was a heavy moment. And to that, I would say I have always known in my head, or the theory, that when something happens or has happened a long time ago, especially a curse, the only person who can undo the curse is, I suppose, the living successor of that person. Even in our Ishekiri tradition, even when it's a wedding or something is going on, there's what you call anokwa, somebody who is representing the ancestor. So I realized that in that moment, I had, if you want to call it, I guess for the younger generation, I had entered the matrix. So I wasn't just looking at it and saying, I have the right to do this. I entered it and I became. I don't know how to say this without sounding like it's ancestral worship. It's almost like I became my grandfather and uttered the words. So I think that was what you probably picked up.
If you don't mind, would you like to expatiate on the curses? Because it was very direct and specific. Did you plan to make that pronouncement in your speech, or it just came?
Yeah, both. I planned it because it became apparent to me that what had happened, because it was actually a longer speech than that, but obviously we had to make it neater, and in the longer speech it would have been more, your question would have been answered. But to answer your question now, the land is a living thing. It is living. And I think it's interesting that the word you gave in 2018, when you said you saw my feet was one with the land, because the land recognizes that the king is the authority. And so the king that was the authority was offended. He was insulted. And whatever he says from the abundance of his heart, it will carry. So he said it. And as I said in the speech yesterday, I do not believe he actually formally recanted. I don't think so. I think with him simply being restored to the throne, it's like all is well with the world. But there are many reasons or many explanations as to why an event happened in history. And several other people may say, oh, that's my understanding of it, and that's fine. But I felt it was my responsibility to undo what I believe was stepping into that matrix and taking responsibility for my actions.
Okay, Olori, I'm going to direct the next question at you. So, being at the coronation yesterday, leading up to that, were there moments when you thought to yourself, is this really going to happen? And then being there and seeing it happen, prophecy actually fulfilled, you being a walking, talking prophetic word. What did that feel like?
It felt very surreal, to be very honest. I still don't think I've actually recovered from yesterday. You're going to have to give me a couple of weeks, if I'm going to be very honest. But in the moment, especially just as you were referring to the speech, in that moment, I couldn't have been more proud of my husband and my king. Like he said, to take a stand for Christ in the face of tradition, and to crown Christ as king and in front of not just your people, but the world, is just amazing. It was nothing short of that. I was completely proud of him. and I still am very proud of him.
So Prophet, the next question is directed at you. Let's talk about numerology. So yesterday was the 21st of August 2021, and the 21st Ulu of Warri was crowned in the 21st century. So there's a lot of 21s. Could you expatiate on what that number signifies?
And maybe Olu might be better at expanding on it than I am. You know, according to the Bible, we know that 21 is mentioned often, but one of the most significant mentions is the book of Daniel, where Daniel prayed and fasted for 21 days. And many people think to themselves, I'm going to do a Daniel fast. And I always say, well, what's that? They say, well, it's a fast for 21 days for breakthrough. If it took Daniel 22 days for the angel to show up, it would have been a 22-day fast. If it took him 23 days, it would have been a 23-day fast. But it took 21 days for breakthrough to happen. And I believe 21 is significant of breakthrough. When you talk about a confrontation, I believe it has been a confrontation. When you hear Olori's voice, she's been battling. A lot of people have been battling because people think that prophecy should happen just because a prophet said it.
In 2019, I approached a heavily pregnant princess, Evie, and asked her a question that the Lord told me to ask her. I said, Evie, would you be the president of RIG Africa? Through shaking lips, she uttered the words that set a continent on fire. Yes. What I didn't know was that this spiritual juggernaut packed with apostolic anointing would go on to lead the best RIG ministry of all our 5 continents. She shot off and immediately launched RIG School, RIG Africa, and RIG Prophetic Conference with 1,000 attendees, marked papers, graduated over 100 students, and all whilst heavily pregnant. It was her faithfulness in the little that let me know that God would trust her with much. It was then that I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that she was destined to be the queen of the nation.
There were a few things that piqued my interest. The process of picking the title. I wondered how that happened, what it looked like, because we didn't get to see any of it. I also want to know what the significance of picking your father's title is about.
Well, the process in itself, the udas, the swords of all the Olus who have gone before you, they are laid.
Physical swords?
Physical swords. And a sword that is plain, which no one has used, is also laid there. And then you are blindfolded, you are led there, and take your time to feel them, process, meditate, and as led, you grab. And the one you lift, that is the title you will bear. If you happen to pick the blank one, you can determine what your name would be.
Sorry, is that like a joker card?
Yes, it's a blank check. I had, and not just because my father bore the title, because the meaning of the name Atuwatse is, or has to do with the one who restores, reforms, and that has always resonated with me. So while praying and meditating on it, it became even the most clear when I began feeling. And as the video will show, when you see it eventually, when I felt the hilt of his sword, there was a strong pull in that direction. And at that point, it was easy.
Olori, this question is for you. In literally 24 hours, there's been a shift in lifestyle. Going from a private individual to a public image with pomp and razzmatazz. How do you intend to navigate that?
Well, I'm thankful because we've had the period of transition prepare ourselves for that already, and I'm thankful for the great team of people that have surrounded us to prepare us for this life. So really just walking and working hand in hand with them to see it easily come together and adjust would be great.
So the question also applies to you, Ogiami.
It's mixed because, and I'm sorry I keep going back there, because obviously I grew up not quite in the eye of the storm. Yes, my father was king, and all my life until he passed in 2015, I only knew him as king. I did not know him as a normal father in a household. So obviously as a young man, and I answered this a few days ago in an interview when I was asked, did you want to be king? And I said, look, every son looks up to his father, and every son always wants to be like his father, especially a son whose father is a king. So I always had it at the back of my mind that, wow, one day I would become a public figure and I would not be able to hide or blend or be anonymous. So in many ways, the last now 5.5, 6 years since my father passed, and knowing that the word had gone out that this was going to happen, it made me appreciate and value being a regular person even more. Being a regular husband. I mean, I am still her husband, but as a regular family, going out with my children, rolling around with them. I don't know how these people will allow me to roll around with them as I used to, but I'm sure we'll find a way around it. I always knew at the back of my mind that one day this would come. And my wife can attest to this. I love going on my walks. I love driving, and especially driving. I would always say to her, I love driving because one day people will pounce on me and say you shouldn't be driving.
I've fallen in love with nations. I've fallen in love with nations, and one of the things I've realized is whatever you fall in love with that is on God's heart, He'll speak to you about.
There's a lot of excitement in the air since the coronation. There's buzz on social media. So, how do you feel being this modern day monarch that has gone viral with his speech in the last 24 hours? Everyone is talking about how handsome the Olu of Warri is. So being in the public eye like that, how does that make you feel?
Cautious. Very cautious. I understand that it's very important, especially for my immediate constituents, the Shekiri people. If you observed the procession yesterday, it was long, it was heavy, but I felt it was important that they didn't see me as high and mighty, and that I could look every single one of them in the eye and smile at them, wave at them. And I think that really encouraged and brought out hope. Aside from that, I am very wary of, in my own effort, presenting myself as though I am this Messiah. Because I'll say it plainly, I am not. I am human, flesh and blood. I will make myself available to however the Lord tells me to go. And as I sang yesterday, let Him take the glory for whatever may appear as though that was a brilliant moment of wisdom, that was a brilliant stroke of genius. I think it's important for even the people who may find this emergence as one that gives them inspiration and hope to know that at the end of the day, I'm just a man, not trying to act holier than thou or perfect. I think it's very important for them, and I think it helps them know that whatever they aspire to with their own shortcomings, their own seeming limitations, they can get there. You don't have to be superhuman. You don't have to be this seemingly impossible achiever to get there. So that's it.
Okay, for you, Prophet Tomi, you're quite literally a prophet to a king. The question is, how would you advise young prophets who want to be seen and seen performing and close to some sort of influential or important person. What would you say to them in terms of how they can use their gift wisely, basically?
One of my prized scriptures, I have many, so I've stopped saying my favorite because every week I have a new favorite. One of my prized scriptures is, Jesus moved with compassion, healed them all. I think we've seen a lot in the prophetic to last us a lifetime. We've seen a lot of error, a lot of what I call manipulation. Manipulation, okay. Transactionalism, and people prostituting the gift for favor. I never sought to be influential. My wife will know I'm a natural introvert, so I've never sought to be known. I've only sought that thing. Jesus moved with compassion, healed them all. It was as if the gift was activated by the fruit of love and compassion. I've fallen in love with nations. One of the things I've realized is when whatever you fall in love with that is on God's heart, He'll speak to you about. And whether you like it or not, the Bible says your gift makes room for you and brings you before important people. But I've never in my life stood in front of people who can partner with what God says. Because most of the people I'm with, some of them aren't even Christians. It's always encouraging to be in front of important people, but it's more encouraging when you actually watch those important people carry the same love for Jesus that you carry. Olori, her faith in God provokes me. Her love for Christ stirs everybody that she gets around. And because of the two of them and their faith and their fidelity, they have been two people. I watched them always stand up and say, the kingdom of Warri has become the kingdom of our God and of His Christ.
Confrontation.
Right in front of me, I saw for the first time what that looks like. I think we all needed to pause for a second and realize Warri just became an affiliate of heaven. What nation do you know that is like that wants to keep the heavens so pure? But here in this new nation, starting from scratch, you have the ability to bring heaven in through leaders that love the Lord and love the people. I've seen it. I've watched their love for the people. And because of that, I'm more committed to this throne than any other place on planet Earth.
That explains the relationship and the bond. Okay, so my next question is about the monarchy. There are a lot of people who think that the monarchy system is outdated. There are a lot of people who think that what's the point of the monarchy when we have the government? So Ogiami, would you like to expand upon the influence that the throne has on the state and how the throne works with the government symbiotically, if that's possible?
As a rookie, just coming in now, I will attempt to answer that by saying thrones are grassroots. They are, well, I feel like a lot of positions of power, they are spiritual, but thrones even more so. And there is really something about thrones that give the people identity. It gives them pleasure, it gives them inspiration. And I'm actually proud that the Shekiri throne is one of those thrones that I mean, I'm sure you must have seen what's happened over the last 48 hours. The people really feel, this is who we are. Delta State as a state, cannot easily make a Deltan feel, I am so proud to be from Delta State. It happens. Nigeria, a lot of times people will say, I'm proud to be a Nigerian. If you really x-ray the question, the statement, there's something about Nigeria that they are proud of, not necessarily Nigeria. And I think the more we craft a true Nigerian identity, we shout one Nigeria a lot. But at the end of the day, when we really sit down to examine what is one Nigeria, it feels like that statement does not appear to be true, because some people seem to have more access to the benefits of being a Nigerian. So oftentimes they just fall back to their locality and they are just proud of their hometown. They are proud of their ethnicity. So that's just it at a basic level. How it relates with the government. Well, I guess I will be learning that in the days to come. But to quote my now brother, His Majesty the Oni of Ife, he released a video that went viral a few months ago where he was in Abuja. He was in the villa, surrounded by the most prominent members of the Nigerian government. And he was asking them, how many of you can go back to your hometowns, stay there for a week, or was it 2 weeks, and not be disturbed? Stay there peacefully. Because you're all sitting in Abuja, or you're sitting in the state capital. But the people who you represent at the locality don't really get to see you as often. There's so much protocol around you. Even when you come around, they can barely see you. So yes, according to the constitution of the country, the power is in their hands. But the traditional rulers, the kings who sit on thrones, they are domiciled in the locality, so they cannot run away. The people are steady approaching them. And so that's why it's very important that there is synergy, there's partnership with the government, so that where the people may not necessarily find it as easy to approach the government, the king that represents them can pick up the phone or make a trip to the government and say, my people are really asking about this. My people would like to see these sorts of things happen. And I think the government appreciates such approach, and to the best of their ability would do what they can, especially when it comes through those channels. So I think that's the best way that I can try to draw analysis on that. But as I said, over the next days, months and years, ask me again in another 10 years.
Okay, so I'd like to ask about the plans going forward, the next 100 days in office.
I think it's going to be a continuation of the speech yesterday. And even interestingly, as the former President Obasanjo spoke today, and the governor of Delta State, Okowa, hampering on healing and unity. Yes, there was a lot of enthusiasm and zeal yesterday, but there was a lot of deep wounds that were inflicted on us as a people, on our identity, on our soul these past few months. And for those who did the damage and for those who received the damage, it's important that both of them go through their own healing so that the reconciliation is pure, is not just forced. It's not just, okay, it's done, let's all get along. There has to be that cleansing. And I'm hoping that these next 100 days, we are able to bring light to those places where certain things need to be addressed inside. And I think once all that is sorted, then we can now talk about the external things, you know, trying to attract investment and infrastructure and all that. But these first 100 days, it's very important to close ranks and be truly unified.
Olori, I'd like to ask if you have any words regarding the plans going forward, what your specific role might be, and any closing remarks.
Just like my husband said, today's day one, so I don't really know of any necessarily like roles that one might have, but I do have a heart for the children, and I do have a heart for education and sustainable development and social enterprise, and I have a vision for that, for the Shekiri people and even the people of Delta State. And so in the months, years to come, I will definitely be, you know, using this platform to promote the things that I've been working on, even in the background before now.
Prophet, any closing remarks?
I just want to encourage the Nigerian people and the diaspora and also the African people at large to continue to pray for this royal house, for their family, for their children, and for their reign as king and queen of this amazing nation. And I just believe that the Lord is not just writing a new chapter for Nigeria, He's writing a new book. And I believe that what we're witnessing is the first fruit of that new book. So I really want to encourage, as Olu said, Nigerians, come home. It's time to build the nation.
Ogiami, any closing remarks?
We have to be ready to renew our minds. One thing I've come to understand is that sentiment is a powerful thing. Whether it goes in a good direction or a bad direction, it is a terribly powerful thing. And you need the will of the people to be in line with what it is you are trying to do. And so I encourage not just the Shekiri people, Niger Deltans, Nigerians generally, to try to renew their minds and be open to the possibilities that abound if only our approach would be different. So that's, for me, that's really what I would close on.
Thank you so much for your time, Ogiami Atuwatse III. Thank you, Olori Atuwatse III. Thank you, Prophet Tomi. It's a wrap.